we can create a component manually. How we can create the component manually? That will be seen. Actually, this part not be that much means useful, because most of the developers is use components create through the CLI. But you at least know how data flow is happen in your Angular application, how it is component flow is there. For that purpose, we just create the component manually. Okay, only purpose for that. But it takes a time to create a component manually. But you have to know at least the flow. For that, we create a component as a manually. Every component we created in an app folder. Always remember, because there is a structure format code. Because Angular has a framework. Framework has its structure. That structure is already present in Angular.json file. They are already mentioned. What is the source file content, index.html, what is your app folder content, all these things here mentioned in your Angular.json file. So don't hamper that structure. Okay, yeah, here always mention that app, and in the app you can get your component. Okay, so always whenever you require any component to create, you can create in app folder. Okay, so initially I can create one more folder. In app folder, I create one folder that is here is the shortcut key provided by the VS Code. Click here to create a folder. I created the component as an employee component. Okay. So employee, I created the folder name employee. And I want to create the component file in that employee folder. So arrow should be in downward direction. That indicates that file is created in employee folder. If your arrow indicates in horizontal direction, that indicates your file will not be created in that folder. It created in app folder. So that notation is also important. Okay, I'm very explaining from the scratch. So please listen carefully. So employee, if you want to create a component, you right click new file and create your component file. For example, employee dot component dot ts file. Now here I mentioned the file name is employee.component. Whether it is required to use that employee.component, means you have to mention that component.component is required to mention that. So answer is yes, it is a standard. It's a recommendation. Use the file name in that fashion, employee.component.ts, because in every project, only one developer is not working on Angular projects. The team is working in your project. So every other person or other developer also recognize that only file name. Okay, this is your component file. Okay, for that you follow that naming convention, employee.component.ts. Okay, so for that I'm using employee.components.ts as a file name. Now enter, it creates your TS file. Again, I want to require a HTML file. So again, click on employee folder, right click, new file. Gives same name, employee.component. Only change the extension .html, because HTML we call it as a view file. You have to create the view file as well for that component. So extension is HTML. Create that HTML file. Again, we require a CSS file. Again, right click, new, create the component name with extension .css. CSS is a style sheet file. Okay, so we use a .css file. Now, in your Typescript file, employee.component.ts file, we have to mention a metadata of that component. And metadata is nothing but your extra information about that component. For that, we use @component decorator. Okay, so use a component nt component decorator. Sorry. Okay, @component open close bracket. Why it is with pictures, I don't know. Okay, open close bracket, curly bracket. It is not imported. I think My PC is very slow. That's why it is not imported. It is present at the rate. Uh, it's not explicitly import. Automatically it is imported basically. So import at the rate component from, it is present at the rate Angular /core. Okay, so it is present in Angular /core. Okay? So basically it is import automatically, but right now my PC is loading purpose, so it takes a time to import, so I can write manually. Okay, now here it at the right component takes a JSON object. In that JSON object there is a one more key is a selector. Means you have to map that component, so mention your selector, that is key name. For example, I mentioned it is in the string format, so app-emp. I just shortcut I'm using the selector name as app-emp. Use because it is a standard, because your component is created in app folder. So before that you mention that app, then use hyphen. No any white space is used in a selector name. Hyphen is allowed, so use hyphen, and shortcutly I mentioned that component name, that is an employee, because that component is employee, so emp. Then style urls, template url. Template url, mention the template url file. Current directory, your component name is okay, I have to just copy that name. Employee component dot html. Then mention your style urls. The style urls is again a urls. It is a plurals, means any component has a multiple style sheet, so it is used as an array. You can mention one or more style sheet file as well. Okay, for that it is giving use an array. In that array mention that your file name employee.component.css. okay, so it is a class level decorator. So here we have to create a class, so we can use export class employee component, that is a class name into curly bracket. Okay, inside that you can write your logic, or other you can create any properties, you can create it in that class. Okay, now second thing is register that component. That's employee component, you have to register. Means whatever the class name you have mentioned, you have to register in your app.module.ts file. Come here, app.module.ts file, in a declaration section you have to register that component. Okay, initially you have to kick fix, and you have to import that. You only use kick fix. You can use a VS Code features, add, then it is imported employee component. Okay, automatic. No need to write down your import section code. That VS Code provides you import automatics. Next, in employee component, I'm just writing a simple template code. Employee component, you are in employee component, you are in employee component. Just display purpose, I'm just writing this one. And now that selector name app-emp, I have to map that component. So we can, where we can map that component, so we can map your component in HTML file in another component file. Means already Angular creates your default component, that is a app.component.html file. In that file you can map your component. So I can map that component here itself in the HTML tag format. Okay, so app-emp, that is my selector name, and we call this map that component in the tag format. So it will output it or render it you are in employee component. Whatever the employee component view file contains, it will render it. So see here, you are in employee component.